focusing on manager operational due diligence, a part of the process that investment managers need to go through in developing portfolios that are robust and sustainable. Later on, I'm going to introduce Alex Wise from OneView and Castle Hall, and Chris Addy, the CEO and founder of Castle Hall. But before we move on, let me just talk a little about a couple of the upcoming events that IMAP is going to be hosting over the next few months. In May 25th in Sydney and June the 8th in Melbourne, we'll be holding the next in our series of MDA Providers Forums. So these are face-to-face get-togethers, you could say, for those licensees who held an MDA operator's authorisation. The first of these was in Sydney a couple of months ago, and Claire Wyville-Plater came along and talked about how ASIC are implementing the updated MDA regulations. At the next session, we have Vaughan Webber, who's Director Equity Capital Markets from Bell Potter, talking about how investment bankers value wealth management companies. So if you're an MDA provider and you're thinking about how to create a more valuable business, this would be a great session for you to come along to. In June, Claire Wyville-Plater from The Fold and I will be running a Responsible Manager Masterclass. So this isn't simply for managed account responsible managers, but is a full day session on how to meet the obligations that you have as a responsible manager. In July, we have the inaugural Portfolio Management Conference. We've called it Through the Managed Account Lens, and this is really designed to talk specifically about the issues around managing portfolios if the outcome is going to be a portfolio that a client holds directly rather than through a pooled vehicle. So it'll be a full day conference in Sydney, and then following that we'll be establishing the first of our dealer investment forums. So like the MDA Provider Forum, these are a couple of hours for the dealer research people and the dealer portfolio construction people to get together, share experiences, listen to somebody talk about a relevant topic. We'll be holding those, as we did last year with the ASIC briefing, concurrently by video conference, Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, hosted by Macquarie. And the other thing which we have coming up is managed account perspectives. So this is our e-magazine. IMAP's generating a lot of content now, and we wanted to capture it and make it available for those who are interested. And so quarterly we'll be capturing the articles and the presentations that IMAP makes available. Today's, for example, will be in the May edition. For those of you who aren't currently subscribers to IMAP, you can subscribe for free as an individual, or dealer groups subscribe for $275, and all other AFSLs for $1,100. That'll give you subscriber benefits in terms of reduced costs to attend the various events that we hold. So now let me pass over to Alex Wise and ask him to introduce today's topic and our primary speaker.
Thank you, Toby, and thanks to IMAP for the opportunity to address your members today, and thanks to OneView for their support in sponsoring the webinar series. Operational due diligence is a topic that covers a multitude of areas. Myself, on my journey as a funds management professional, started doing operational due diligence on hedge funds back in 2002 in London, and it was quite a wild environment back then. And one manager that many private European wealthy investors had in their portfolio was Madoff, and that was a clearly what became later apparent as a fraud, but something that did not pass the basics of operational due diligence and verifications. Now, coming into the Australian environment, there is a huge challenge to find some really attractive absolute return alpha seeking boutiques in their early stages, whether those come from locally domiciled boutiques. And let's go back in history and think about, for those investors that were very early investors with Platinum or Magellan, for example, were able to unearth a really high quality boutique. For those that invested into hedge funds, those that invested with Benelong long short equity, has one of the most enviable track records in the world. But getting comfortable with a manager, getting comfortable with their abilities, and the risks that surrounds their business as a whole, is what is more popularly termed operational due diligence. In a managed accounts environment, a number of different areas immediately crop up, and Chris Addy will touch on these shortly. But particularly around the reputational risk of investing with a manager. Now, the managed account component could be dealt with under a custodied equities portfolio, but of course, the manager may also have unlisted unit trusts that form part of their portfolio, which they look after. So understanding the business risk, the operational risk, the compliance, the technology, all of those aspects that contribute to a manager's operating environment. Now, I first met Chris it's probably around 2007, 2008. By that time, I was running my own operational due diligence consulting firm and consulting to a number of institutional investors in Australia. Chris had established Castle Hall, and we had a similar model. We both worked for asset allocators and investors conducting due diligence on funds managers or managed accounts advisors. I think the thing that struck me about Chris's business was being based in North America, the capacity that he had to grow, and having grown Castle Hall from himself working out of his home office to a firm of 50 professionals based out of North America, the Middle East, and here as well as Europe, to cover the range of managers across the world. So with that, I'll hand over to Chris Addy.
Great. Well, again, thank you very much to IMAP and OneView for the opportunity to present today. Now, I think we've prepared a brief presentation, and I'll just let Alex handle the controls to change the screen. What I've put together today is hopefully an overview of what is operational due diligence, and provide a sense of the scope and methodology of a typical due diligence review, as well as some comments around the process of conducting due diligence for an individual fund, as well as across an established portfolio. Now, I do understand that the webinar functionality we're using today does allow the participants to type in various questions. So certainly very happy to respond to those as they come in. And I just ask the other participants around the OneView table, if any questions come in, just tap me on the shoulder and be very happy to respond. Again, just to reiterate Alex's personal introduction, so Castle Hall Alternatives is based in Montreal in Canada, despite my British accent. We have offices in Montreal, Toronto, and Halifax in Canada, Zurich, Switzerland, Abu Dhabi, and a presence here in Australia. In terms of our footprint, we have the opportunity to complete on-site due diligence to more than 400 asset managers globally each year. That does include, as you would expect, a large number of managers in the United States, the UK, Europe, as well as global jurisdictions. And I think it's notable that operational due diligence, I think, typically was a discipline that really lived and emerged from the land of hedge funds, particularly when hedge funds were the best called the secret club of the super rich. We're certainly seeing operational due diligence now become a much broader and established discipline that applies across asset classes. Certainly, the evolution of due diligence to be focusing in on private equity, real estate, and infrastructure is a very notable trend for global allocators, as well as more broadly the questions related to due diligence in more traditional long-only portfolios, be they held through a pooled structure, regulated or private, or being held direct on a broker, custodian, balance sheet through a managed account format. I also think it's very notable that here in Australia, the regulatory environment is probably more explicit and more developed, certainly compared to other major jurisdictions, with respect to the sentiment requirement that due diligence is performed on those external third-party managers who fall within a portfolio, and certainly some of the regulatory initiatives that have taken place here in Australia over the past 12 to 36 months, I think really are leading edge in the industry. Certainly in Canada, we can't get our act together to have a single regulator, let alone get them to explain what a hedge fund is. So moving on from that. So perhaps, Alex, if I can just ask you to drive as we go forward. The slides I put together today are relatively basic, but hopefully will provide a little bit of context to everyone on the call. Probably the starting point is really to answer the question of what is this operational due diligence stuff, and why should us accountants and attorneys be concerned about the overall investment process of supporting the process from allocators to discover attractive third-party managers who can add value to a diversified portfolio. At a very simple level, really, I view the world as being divided between investment risk and everything else. And everything else really is the operational risk. Of course, what we mean by investment risk is the risk that we are paid to take, the risk that we have volatility in returns, and of course on the downside, the risk that we lose money through unprofitable trading. That could be something at the stock selection level, that could be at the portfolio construction level, but essentially that an investment manager does not meet the expected return and volatility over the lifetime of the investment, either in absolute terms or in terms of a direct drawdown, a direct loss of capital, as the case may be. But ultimately, that's the risk that I think we all understand that we take when we allocate to a third-party investment manager. We're evaluating his or her capability to identify undervalued stocks and assets and develop an investment strategy that meets our expectation. If they fail to do that, then of course that is part of our investment research, monitoring, oversight process, at which point we would likely elect to withdraw capital from that manager and seek an alternative that better meets our portfolio construction needs. That ultimately is the heart of running an investment portfolio. But what happens if something else comes along that could be impactful upon the conduct of an investment portfolio, the conduct to select third-party asset managers? So the most obvious, as Alex has already alluded to, the most obvious risk is that we have deliberate theft and fraud. So it turns out that we invest with an asset manager that is a crook. So that may be that simply the entire fund is a Ponzi scheme. It may be that the investment manager has a slightly flexible attitude to their fees and feel if there is insufficient fees coming directly from the management fee, then perhaps the fund may provide an additional source of capital to support their lifestyle. It may be that there is a deliberate misvaluation of assets. The portfolio manager decides that there is a way into changing the valuation of the portfolio to conceal trading losses. But clearly the first goal of operational due diligence is to avoid the direct risk of loss through dishonesty. I do think, though, it's very, very important to recognize that due diligence is not purely an insurance policy against catastrophic failure. It's not purely an insurance policy against the risk of direct loss due to fraudulent activity. Thankfully, there are, while there are certainly plenty of high-profile fraud cases related to participants in the asset management industry, there are plenty of high-profile fraud cases related to any area of day-to-day business activity. In my mind, there is as much care and attention and value in focusing on the risk of an honest mistake. So even an honest asset manager can have an error related to a systems problem, related to an accounting error, relating to some other sort of operational glitch within the day-to-day operations of their portfolio, day-to-day operations of their fund. Does that manager have ex ante the appropriate compensating controls in place that give reasonable assurance that if they do make a mistake, someone's going to find it before there is any chance for the portfolio to have a loss in value? So obviously question number one is someone dishonest? And even honest, question number two, even honest people can make an honest mistake. I think more broadly, in my final topic, really is to think about the value of the broader business infrastructure. An asset management company is a business like any other business. It just happens to be that what comes out of the factory gate is not a widget, it is investment performance. So like any business, does the business have a good and effective capability to deliver a quality product? So we would certainly hope that a manager that's well-resourced, has good systems, good procedures, is well capitalized, has a secure business operating model, that's an environment that's going to allow them to run their business more effectively, which over time should be able to generate additional performance. There's sort of the concept, and I'm rather not a particular fan of the phrase, but there's the concept of operational alpha, of can a manager who is well structured over time run their business better and consequently generate better investment performance. The flip side to that is a manager that's under-resourced, has poor management. Are they going to be able to stay in business and build a successful portfolio over time? It goes without saying, and I imagine there'll be a few rueful smiles from some of the individuals on this call, that potentially the skills that make an individual an exceptional money manager are not also the skills that make you good at managing a business. Typically, the alpha personalities that help you identify value in the stock market does not make you the holistic people person that makes you a good HR manager to